It is day 3 of the war between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States and Israel, and sirens are continuing to sound across the state of Israel as Iran fires ballistic missiles into the country. The Israeli military says that they now expect the ongoing operation against Iran to take more than a week. Now, the latest incident, at least 19 people have been wounded, and one of whom we now know is in moderate condition following ballistic missile impact on a residential area in the southern Israeli city of Beersheba. This comes after 9 people were killed in an impact yesterday afternoon in Beit Shemesh, just near Jerusalem, and another 2 were killed prior in central Israel. As of now, almost 800 people have been hospitalized in Israel since the start of the fighting. The IDF says it has destroyed around 600 Iranian regime sites and airstrikes, including 20 sites belonging to Iran's security leadership, 150 ballistic missiles and launchers, and 200 air defense systems. Well, joining us now from the site of the ballistic missile attack in Beersheba is our correspondent, Joe Brown. Joe, you are there at the scene. What do we know about this missile impact and why were so many injured?
So this happened at around about 12:30, so 3.5 hours ago, and luckily it didn't hit any building per se. It hit a courtyard, and we can actually see where the missile landed. There is a huge crater here, probably about 6 or 7 feet deep. This is where it landed. Most people had already heard the sirens and the warnings from beforehand, so they were in their shelters, but in total there were 19 people who were injured, most of whom were from glass fragments. And if you look at the buildings all around here, you can see exactly why. Every single window has been ripped out. There's shards of glass all over the floor. In some cases, large chunks of walls have been removed. I'm actually looking into what looks like someone's living room or bedroom right now. The frames are all over the place. As we were walking towards here, we could see people who were packing up their bags, evacuating from here and moving to hotels or somewhere safer. But this is the case for all of the buildings around here. Most of these buildings, just looking at the architecture, seems to be brutalist, so built around 1950 to 1970. Most of these, in fact, almost all of these do not have any shelter in. That only became legal for buildings that were built after 1990. And if you look at the taller buildings just up there, those are examples of modern buildings. And you can actually see everything is intact because they were built with much stronger windows, much sturdier material in their building. And that's why they've been able to stand there. So this is actually a major issue for Israel right now. The fact that if you go through any places where there have been missile hits, such as in Tel Aviv, you can actually see which of the new buildings and which of the old buildings based off how badly damaged they were. The one that had the worst damage in Tel Aviv was one that was an old building, and very similar to this, it landed just in front of it. It didn't hit the building itself, it landed just in front. There was a huge crater, as there is right now. And this is something that Israel is going to have to deal with in the future. But as of right now, luckily, no one was killed. No one seriously injured either. But 19 people have been sent to Soroka Hospital in Beersheba.
All right. That's our correspondent, Joe Brown. Thank you so much for that update. We're going to be back with you later throughout the day. You know, we're going to be turning to our next story right now. Iran's missile pattern against Israel does not seem to be changing. According to Israel's Home Front Command, Iran appears to be trying to launch bigger, more coordinated ballistic missile barrages. In the past day, we have seen salvos of about 9 to 30 missiles at a time, followed by long, quiet stretches. And that is very different from day one, when Iran was firing just 2 or 3 missiles at a time with short breaks in between. Now, the IDF believes that Iran is trying to organize much larger attacks, dozens at once, but is struggling because the Israeli Air Force is actively hunting down missile launchers across Iran. It is important to note that Iran actually did not fire any ballistic missiles at Israel overnight, but Israel does say that the Islamic Republic fired a ballistic missile carrying a cluster bomb warhead at central Israel last night. That's a missile that is designed to release tons of small explosive munitions, causing a lot more damage over a wider area. Well, joining us now in the studio, we have our senior Middle East correspondent, Ariel Osran, and our senior diplomatic correspondent, Owen Alterman. So, Ariel, I want to turn to you first. You know, we spoke about this yesterday, but we've been seeing Iran's missile pattern shift right now to kind of a larger, more coordinated salvo scenario. Is this a sign that they're trying to conserve launchers under Israeli air pressure? Or do you think they're actually preparing for a much larger strike?
Well, we have to take two things into consideration. One, the Iranians are saying that they're planning for a prolonged war, and so they have to, stagger their launches. And what we saw in the opening 36 hours were high-frequency launches with low-quantity missiles, and now they appear to have flipped that script. Now, why is that? I think what we can identify is that in Iran's eyes, they haven't succeeded in really causing significant damage to the Israeli home front, to the civilian population whom they are targeting alongside military targets. But we are seeing with the targets that are hit that they are aiming at civilian population centers. And so in an attempt to increase the chances of the likelihood of these missiles to penetrate the air defenses, it is easier to do that when you launch 30 missiles in a barrage rather than 5 to 10. And so this is their strategy. They see that initially their strategy, which was different than in the 12-day war, Rising Lion, they did manage to penetrate Israel's defenses with large salvos. They tried to change that at the beginning of the war. They saw that it didn't work, so now they're returning to their initial strategy.
Now, Owen, I want to turn to you because Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth actually just made his first public remarks to reporters since these military operations against Iran began on Saturday. What did he say?
Right, we learned actually a lot from this press conference, Natasha. Let's actually listen to what Hegseth had to say, and we'll take it apart afterwards. Here's Pete Hegseth a short time ago at his press conference at the Pentagon.
The mission of Operation Epic Fury is laser focused. Destroy Iranian offensive missiles, destroy Iranian missile production, destroy their navy and other security infrastructure, and they will never have nuclear weapons. This is not Iraq. This is not endless. I was there for both. Our generation knows better, and so does this president. He called the last 20 years of nation-building wars dumb, and he's right. This is the opposite.
So, Natasha, there is news here, right? Pete Hegseth is sketching out the mission of this war in three parts. The missile program, the Navy, interesting given the threat to the Strait of Hormuz, and the nuclear program. He said in a different part of the press conference, this is not a regime change war, but the regime sure does change, kind of skating that difference of what exactly the Trump administration wants to see. As so many of our viewers know, there's a lot of hand-wringing right now in the United States about what exactly is the goal of this war, what's the mission, what are the off-ramps, how will Americans know whether the war has succeeded? And here Hegseth putting his own stamp on that it's not about regime change. It is about degrading Iran's capabilities in those three areas. Of course, different to what we've heard from Donald Trump in some places.
Right. And I think that's what obviously stands out here. Obviously, we've seen the death now of 4 U.S. personnel. Does that change the situation significantly?
It seems to me that 4 casualties won't, but obviously a rising casualty toll could put real weight on a war that's already not popular in the public opinion. Just to remind ourselves, the poll that came out on yesterday, actually from Reuters, 27% support, 43% against, so a plurality against the war. Even in the United States, in the Reserve Americans, even in the Republican Party, 32% against, even if a majority is in favor.
Right.
So Donald Trump doesn't start this war with a strong base of support, unlike past American wars. So obviously casualties will play a role. Just to give a sense of comparison for our viewers, there's not so much hand-wringing here in Israel about the mission. The view is to simply do as much as possible, destroy as much as possible, degrade as much as possible, and do as much as possible until the clock from one direction or another runs out on this war.
Right. And I mean, we're going to be speaking about Hezbollah shortly. I think that's very clear to understand, given the fact that it's many Israeli citizens that have personally experienced the wrath of the Islamic Republic and its network of proxy terror groups that have been targeting the state of Israel and civilians. But we're going to turn now to home front command instructions quickly. Inside Israel, restrictions are staying in place nationwide until at least Wednesday night at 8 p.m. No gatherings are allowed. School remains closed. Workplaces are closed except essential sectors. But there is a bit of movement when it comes to travel. Israel is expected to start gradually reopening its airspace this evening. The skies have been shut since Saturday. And in the meantime, the Israeli carrier Israel says it's launching a way to get Israelis who are stranded abroad back home. Starting tomorrow, the airline is going to be operating special flights from 6 European cities. That includes Prague, Budapest, and Bergamo in Italy, not to Israel, but to Taba, which is the airport in Egypt, just across the border from Eilat, and from there, passengers can cross by land back into Israel. So what is happening in Iran? Well, Iran's state-run Red Crescent now says that 555 people have been killed across 131 cities in U.S. and Israeli strikes since this began. Now, the numbers don't actually distinguish between civilians and Islamic Republic combatants, but it is important to note that because of the widespread internet blackout across Iran, it is very difficult to verify these numbers. And joining us now is Navid Mohebi. He's an Iranian-American analyst in Washington, D.C. So what information do we actually have right now about what is happening on the ground in Iran, especially when it comes to casualties?
Thank you for having me on. As you mentioned, there is a total internet blackout in Iran. It's very hard to verify information. The information that we are receiving in Iran are mainly through Starlink. Iranians who have access to Starlink, which is very limited. But yes, it seems like there are around 500 casualties, and many of them, I believe, are members of the Basij. In the past 2 days, Israel has concentrated on Tehran, especially Basij headquarters, IRGC headquarters, and intelligence headquarters in Tehran. So I assume that a lot of people have lost their lives. At the same time, Iranian regime propaganda outlets are concentrating on an attack on a high school in Iran, which is not exactly known who was responsible for that, but a lot of Iranians are blaming the regime for what happened.
Mm-hmm. Iran says that at least 153 people have been killed after a reported strike hit a school in southern Iran. And they're blaming the United States and Israel. The U.S. says that it's looking into reports about this incident. Israel's military said it wasn't aware of any IDF operations in the area. Of course, we do know that the girls' school was located in Minab. That's near an Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps base, which has previously been a target. So what do you know about this? Because this story seems to be the one that is going the most viral amongst international outlets.
Yeah, I have seen that. It's very unfortunate that, over the past 2 months, when Iranians took to the street, around 32,000 Iranians were massacred. The international community, especially some in the media, and those on the left were silent, but now all of a sudden they're concerned about the lives of Iranians. I think that's very ironic to me that I'm seeing such reactions. But as I mentioned, nobody in Iran trusts the Iranian regime and their reporting, and it seems like the only people that are believing the regime is some segment of American society and the media. But based on what I'm seeing on social media, Iranians are blaming the regime because they understand, just as Hamas, they hide behind schools and hospitals, they may have done the same thing, or they even strike the school themselves. So we have to wait and see what comes out of it. But as I said, Iranians do not trust the Iranian regime reporting. What we are seeing nowadays, based on the videos that is coming out from Iran, especially in Tehran and Karaj, every time people hear an explosion, you will see people chant from their windows and rooftops. They say, "Down with the Islamic Republic," and they say, "Long live the king." They chant and slogans and celebrate, and you have also seen Iranian diaspora celebrating the death of Khamenei, and I think that the support for this operation is very strong inside Iran and among Iranian diaspora.
All right, Navid, thank you so much for joining us with that breakdown. We are going to continue with the war between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the U.S. and Israel, just getting bigger overnight, quite honestly. For the first time since the 2024 ceasefire, the Lebanese terror group Hezbollah, which is an Iranian proxy group, has officially jumped in. Just after about 1 o'clock in the morning, rockets and drones were launched from Lebanon toward northern Israel. The IDF says that one rocket was intercepted Others landed in open areas, and at least 2 drones were shot down. Hezbollah says that this was revenge for the killing of Ali Khamenei, who was assassinated, as we know, in the opening minutes of the joint U.S.-Israeli assault on Iran on Saturday. Now, it is important to remember that Hezbollah is just one of the Islamic Republic's proxy groups in its so-called axis of resistance in the Middle East, which the regime funds and arms to help spread Sharia law worldwide, expand its regional dominance, push out Western influence across the Middle East, and target Israel. And Israel has hit back immediately and hard. Airstrikes last night pounded southern Lebanon and Beirut's Dakhia district, which is Hezbollah's stronghold. The IDF says Israel is no longer just responding. It is now in an offensive campaign against Hezbollah that could last several days. Right now, you are seeing live images of Lebanon following yet another wave of Israeli strikes in Beirut, targeting Hezbollah military outlets and terrorists. Now, I want to turn to Dr. Barak Books, who's joining us right now from the Patterson Chair in Security and Intelligence Research Center. Hezbollah waited until after Khamenei was killed to formally jump into this fight. Was this inevitable in your opinion, or is it a calculated move that is coordinated directly from Tehran to try to show that the axis of resistance is still intact?
Yes, I can say that there was a pressure inside Lebanon and even an appeal from the Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salam, for Hezbollah to sustain any activity. But the Iranians, according to reports, felt disappointed that the proxies that they developed so much are not intervening. I can draw parallel from the Houthis, which are not Lebanon, but they published a very touching proclamation of solidarity without any intervention. So there was a pressure inside Lebanon, on the one hand, from the population not to intervene, and from the government, which is newly established and trying to maintain order. And even I'm adding an American general of CENTCOM, General Jeffers, who is the coordinator between Israel and the Lebanese establishment, not to intervene. On the other hand, one can say that the new chief of staff, CEO of Hezbollah, is not so effective. I'm not sure whether he's managing. And it was an Iranian order.
Now, I just want to update in regards to the images that everybody's seeing live here right now. Those are Beirut's southern suburbs. Again, this is a Hezbollah stronghold within the capital of Lebanon. Now, Israel has said it is no longer just responding, but launching an offensive campaign that could last for days. The question, of course, is whether we're going to be looking into another kind of full-blown conflict between Israel and Hezbollah, and whether or not the current Lebanese government and leadership has any way of actually stopping that from happening.
In a continuation to the former question, the leadership, the government had a very security intense meeting today. There is a pressure to Hezbollah to sustain. The launches were to Haifa and the Galilee. Of course, Hezbollah is capable of doing more. In a hope it will not do more. But it's now among a pressure from both sides. Iran to intervene as much as the Iranians are under pressure from the US and the Israelis. And from the Lebanese population. I must add one thing. In Lebanon, in contrast to other countries, there are moderate, so to speak, moderate Shiites. As the chairman of the parliament, Nabi Berri, was the head of the Shiite Amal movement. He's not Hezbollah. He is Shiite, he is affiliated to the Shiite sect, but he's not a supporter of Hezbollah in the Iranian stance.
Right.
And he's a part of the establishment.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Books, for joining us. We're going to be covering the conflict between Hezbollah and Israel in the coming hours. But right now, we're going to turn to Iran continuing to strike Gulf Arab states in response to U.S. and Israeli strikes. They say they're targeting American and Israeli assets, but the Islamic Republic has also hit hotels, airports, and residential areas in 8 different countries: the UAE, Qatar, Jordan, Kuwait, Oman, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Bahrain. Explosions were reported in Bahrain and Dubai overnight. Smoke was seen near the U.S. Embassy in Kuwait. An Iraqi Shiite militia claimed it targeted U.S. troops at Baghdad airport with a drone. And even in Cyprus, the UK's Raf Akortiri base was hit by what officials say was a suspected Iranian drone strike. Limited damage there, no casualties, but still, that is a European Union nation that was targeted by Iran. So let's turn back to our correspondents. We have our senior Middle East correspondent, Ariel Osran, and our senior diplomatic correspondent, Owen Alterman, here with us. Now, obviously, I think what's interesting to the rest of the world who's watching this is the response that we're seeing from Gulf Arab nations when it comes to these strikes. Is there support for the United States and Israel? Is that being said verbally out loud, or is that something that is still kind of being kept quiet, per se?
Natasha, from the get-go, these countries have been extremely determined, especially the Saudis and the Emiratis, from their first statement on Saturday morning after the first attacks, extremely determined and extremely angry in a way that I think surprised me and far exceeded my expectations. And then in the last few hours, a joint statement just beyond those two countries and Bahrain, including also Qatar significantly, and Jordan and others, coming out and basically telling the Iranians, stop or we are going to respond militarily. To see the Qataris do that and to join on the same statement, for example, with the UAE, is really extraordinary. It seems to me that the Iranians understood they were taking on a big, big risk with attacks like these, but did it with an understanding that they didn't have much of a choice. But as usual, when you take big risks, you usually don't get the big reward. Usually the risk boomerangs on you, and that seems to be what happened in the Iranian case. What's also most curious is that now the Europeans are being brought into the net. Look, they attacked the British base, which is a British sovereign territory, but surrounded, of course, by the Republic of Cyprus, where the president had to give a speech to the nation yesterday, had to close schools. There were sirens that sounded Nicosia, the capital, and reportedly an attack even on an American installation in Nicosia. The European Union, in a way, being swept into this, to the point where Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, comes and said, we stand in solidarity with our member states and won't accept them being hit.
Right.
You ask yourself, what are the Iranians thinking, trying to widen the circle, not just to the Gulf, but even to Europe?
Right. You know, I want to turn to you, Ariel. We heard Iranian leadership essentially say that the war that is being waged on the Islamic Republic is a war against Muslims around the world. But then we see these strikes by Iran on Gulf Arab states. These are mainly Muslim-majority countries,
During
right?
Ramadan.
During Ramadan. And we also know that these strikes are not just hitting American assets. They're hitting hotels, airports, residential areas. Ultimately, is this strategic spillover? Is this on purpose? Is this accidental? How do you take this messaging? And do you think that the Gulf Arab states are actually buying that?
This is not accidental. Even in the lead up to this, weeks before these strikes began, Iran said they will strike regional countries that house American bases, that this will be a regional war if the United States and Israel attack Iran. So they telegraphed that they were going to do this. Now, did anyone expect they would actually do it? I think there was some surprise in these Gulf states, but ultimately I think Iran here made a massive miscalculation. It is trying to, I think, take a page from Israel's playbook. After October 7th, Israel launched attacks on 7 different countries who attacked it in retaliation, and this gave Israel the image of this unrestrained bully that is, striking whoever it wants to strike.
These 7 countries were part of the axis of resistance of the Islamic Republic of
Also,
Iran.
Ariel, of course, Israel attacks countries that don't have any real prospect of friendship with us. The Gulf states, in most cases, had gone out of their way to call for the war not to happen.
No, for sure.
To balance their relations with Iran.
I'm still in the middle of making my point. Ultimately, this is how Israel was perceived after the Seven Front War, and it helped its deterrence because it seemed as this, bull in a china shop. Iran wanted to maintain or try to retain its own deterrence by taking that page from Israel's playbook, by attacking everyone to seem as if it has to be revered, it has to be feared. But this is a massive miscalculation because, as Owen described, there was no proper legitimacy for these attacks because they didn't strike Iran. These are economic partners, trade partners, $30 billion last year between Iran and the UAE alone. And so this is a massive miscalculation that could turn the entire Gulf, not just Bahrain and the UAE, who are already in the Abraham Accords, into a strategic alignment with Israel.
Okay, we're going to quickly turn now to our correspondent, Emily Francis, who is live from a bomb shelter in Tel Aviv. Emily, we've been seeing air defense systems activated throughout the day. What is the Israeli Air Force, what is the Home Front Command telling Israelis to do? Are you seeing a lot of people in this bomb shelter that you're in right now?
Well, fortunately, no, Natasha, as, sometimes we forget that today is actually the holiday of Purim. So coming here, You're not seeing people outside. You're not seeing them, in costumes celebrating. But here right now, it's quiet. It's quiet, hopefully not before a storm. People not out in droves outside on the streets, some just choosing to stay here and sleep and rest. We've had some, young IDF soldiers here, men and women, some security. But right now, fortunately, it's quiet, and let's hope it stays that way.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank you, Emily, for joining us. We're going to be back with you for longer. We just have to go out for a quick commercial break here on I-24 News. I'm Natasha Kirchuk. Thank you to our correspondents in studio for joining us. We are going out for a commercial break, but we will be back shortly with continued rolling coverage of the ongoing war between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States and Israel. Don't go anywhere. This is I-24 News. And we are back on I-24 News. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for sticking with us. It is day 3 of the war between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States and Israel. And the IDF has just announced a wave of fresh strikes against Islamic Republic targets in Iran, targeting Iranian nuclear facilities. So far, Israeli forces say that they've destroyed around 600 Iranian regime sites in airstrikes. At the same time, we're seeing that the Islamic Republic is continuing to launch ballistic missiles at Israel, with the most recent barrage just about 20 minutes ago targeting central Israel. Meanwhile, Iran's missile pattern against Israel does seem to be changing. According to Israel's Home Front Command, Iran appears to be trying to launch bigger and more coordinated ballistic missile barrages. In the past day, we have seen salvos of 9 to 30 missiles at a time, followed by long, quiet stretches. That's very different from day 1, when Iran was firing just 2 or 3 missiles at a time with short breaks in between. Now, the IDF believes that Iran is trying to organize much larger attacks, dozens at once, but is struggling because the Israeli Air Force is actively hunting down missile launchers across Iran. Now, it's important to note that Iran did not fire ballistic missiles at Israel overnight. But last night specifically, Israel says that Iran fired a ballistic missile carrying a cluster bomb warhead at central Israel. That is a missile that is very dangerous, designed to release tons of small explosive munitions, which can cause a lot more damage over a wider area. The Israeli military says that they now expect the ongoing operation against Iran to take more than a week. And joining us in the studio is our senior Middle East correspondent, Ariel Osran, and our senior diplomatic correspondent, Owen Alterman, who is with us as well. All right. So obviously, we're seeing that the IDF says that it struck a wide range of different targets across the Islamic Republic of Iran. But of course, the question is, when it comes to missile launchers, more specifically, how much of that infrastructure has actually been taken out? The numbers that we saw released was something like 150, which seems like a very low number, given the fact that the IDF also assesses that Tehran has around 2,500 ballistic missiles.
Right. So what we're seeing right now happening over the skies of Iran is both Israeli Air Force and U.S. CENTCOM forces are going after a wide array of targets. Now, with regards to the ballistic missiles, that figure that you gave, that comes from the IDF. Now, we also know that CENTCOM is going after Iranian ballistic missile launchers and the missiles themselves simultaneously. And so that figure is a partial figure, but this is significant because those are 150 fewer ballistic missiles that could be launched at Israeli territory. And as we're seeing develop over the past 3 days, Iran is targeting mainly civilian population centers. Now, this does hinder their ability to launch these missiles, but in addition to the missiles, what is more strategic is going after the missile launchers. And we have seen footage by both the IDF and CENTCOM of numerous launchers being taken out. We don't have the exact figure, but this is part of what is limiting Iran's ability to maintain a high pace of barrages at Israel and to include in each barrage large amounts of missiles. I will note that when Iran is saying that they are planning for a long war, that is what they believe is going to happen. So they are calculating their reserves, their ammunition with regards to each barrage, but with the IDF and U.S. forces simultaneously going after Iranian ballistic missile launchers and the missiles themselves, this diminishes the capacity of Iran to overwhelm Israel's defense systems.
Owen, I want to talk about just the length of what this war is expected to be. You know, obviously we have just heard the Israeli military assessing at least a week. And then we hear this commentary from U.S. President Donald Trump. He said that this is an operation that could take 4 weeks, even 5 weeks. Is there any way for us to kind of sift through all of this rhetoric and understand what is really going to happen on the ground here?
You know, Natasha, earlier on our Hebrew channel, I was trying to explain Donald Trump, and not for the first time, to Israelis. And what I said, it's a bit like those impressionistic French painters who have individual dots in different colors. So you look and you see an orange dot when he says one thing and a green dot when he says another thing. But to understand, you have to step back and see the whole picture. So we have another dot from the last hour or so in Donald Trump's interview with CNN, where he talks about 4 weeks, but then again says this campaign's going ahead of schedule, so we might not need 4 weeks. That's the latest. But again, we also heard 4 to 5 weeks. We heard even shorter periods of time earlier on, and we heard him say a week or until all of the goals are met. Again, two very different things. We don't know. War is dynamic, particularly this campaign, especially because we're not exactly sure what Donald Trump's true war aim here is, and that may emerge according to the circumstances. As I've said also before, we in Israel aren't doing so much hand-wringing about the objective of the war. The objective is very clear: to hit the Iranians as hard as possible, to destroy as much of their military power as possible, to destroy as much of their missile infrastructure as possible, to destroy even further as much of their nuclear infrastructure as possible, to kill as many of their leaders as possible, and, if possible, obviously, to topple the regime. So in Israel, there's not much hand-wringing. In the United States, there is, but it's hard to separate at the end of the day the question of how long the campaign lasts from what the campaign's supposed to achieve.
Right. All right. Well, we're going to turn now to the Lebanese terror group Hezbollah, which is an Iranian proxy group and has officially now jumped into the war between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the U.S. and Israel. Just after 1 o'clock in the morning last night, rockets and drones were launched from Lebanon toward northern Israel. The IDF says that one rocket was intercepted. Others landed in open areas, and at least 2 drones were shot down. Now, Hezbollah says that this was revenge for the killing of Ali Khamenei, who was assassinated in the opening minutes of the joint U.S.-Israeli assault on Iran on Saturday. But Israel has hit back immediately and hard with consistent airstrikes across southern Lebanon and Beirut's Dayyan district, which is Hezbollah's stronghold. The latest round of airstrikes took place about an hour and a half ago. The IDF says that this is now an offensive campaign against Hezbollah that could last several days. Joining us now, do we have Trump? No. All right. Joining us now is Brigadier General in the Reserves, Professor Jacob Nagel, a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies and former acting Israeli National Security Advisor. Now,
much better than Trump.
Well, you know, I'm not going to say anything about that, but I know.
I'm joking.
But what I do want,
he is the best. Yeah. Okay.
Not going to say that either. But what I do want to hear from you is your perception about the timing in which Hezbollah decided to get involved in this conflict with Iran. Obviously, the reason that was stated by the Hezbollah terror group was following the killing of the supreme leader. But what do you make of this timing? And do you think that we're going to be seeing any harder pounding from Lebanon, or at the end of the day, is going to be very limited because of fears about political upheaval?
First of all, I heard the end of what you talked with the previous one that you interviewed. And again, about timing, you know, it's very interesting. Everyone wants to know when it starts, when it finished. We need a patient, and I will take what President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu are saying very cautiously. And again, there is no question about the war goals and about the final goal. And the final goal is to make sure that the people of Iran are going to take their destiny in their hands and will move down, topple, weaken, change. You can name it whatever you want in the English word, to change the regime that really makes them suffer for 47 years. Now about the Hezbollah. During the last campaign in 2024, 2025, Remember that if I was the chairman of the board of Iran and I look on my investment in Hezbollah, of course in Hamas, but in Hezbollah, it's a very, very, very poor and very bad investment. We invest hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe billions of dollars during the years. For the time that when there will be a war between Israel and Iran, they will call Hezbollah and Hezbollah will join. But because of what happened, because of Hamas and Hezbollah hit so hard that there is the ceasefire now in Lebanon, according to Israeli terms, that we can eat whenever we see an imminent threat. And they went back from northern the Litani in order to make sure that no threat on Israel. Now, we didn't finish the work with Hezbollah. We still have many things to achieve, even so they are hit very, very hard. So they didn't do anything to help Iran during the war, the 12-day war and the war before and after. And even now, after 48 hours, they did nothing. We know that there is a lot of pressure from Iran on Hezbollah to do something. So yesterday, there was a small something again. For Israel, everything from Hezbollah now is not small. And believe me, it's not nice to say so, but I'm not disappointed from their decision because we have many, many targets in Hezbollah. We have still work to do. So if they are taking the challenge and joining the war today, they will suffer. We saw the Lebanese government and the Lebanese people are really, really begging the Hezbollah not to join because at the end, Lebanon will suffer. Right. There is a warning from Israel government saying to the Lebanese government, you are the sovereign people in Lebanon. So if you will do something like this, what will be our reaction? It will be against infrastructure of Lebanon, civilian infrastructure that it will really devastate the challenges or they are trying to go back to normal life. And while the Hezbollah is still ruling a big part of what Lebanon is doing, it's going to be very, very tough. So the timing is not really yesterday, tomorrow, today before. They are trying to do something. Maybe after what they suffered, they are now regretting it, but never mind. Israel will now, they started, Israel will now dictate when we finish this round.
That is for certain.
Making sure that we are doing what we need to do.
Okay, I'd like to thank you for joining us, Professor. We're going to turn now to our security analyst, Yaakov Lapin. Obviously, you know, we are seeing what Israel has declared is now an offensive operation against Hezbollah following the drone and rocket attacks last night. At this point, what are Hezbollah's capabilities? And do you think they're very much taking into account the Lebanese government and what it has to say about the fears of being pulled into yet another conflict with Israel?
I don't think they're taking the Lebanese government into account at all. Otherwise, they wouldn't have fired the rockets last night. It is interesting to note that what they fired from what they were able to fire, it's small. It's a small volley. It's actually two volleys, one at 1 a.m. and the second at 3 a.m. It's almost as if Hezbollah wanted to sort of mark on a checklist that they stood firm for their sponsor. And they were sort of trying to, trying to encourage Israel to view it as a small attack so that the response would be small. Now, what we're hearing from defense officials in Israel is that there is no such equation on the table. Israel no longer is going to distinguish between 6 rockets and 60 and 600. If you fire on the state of Israel, on the largest city in the north, in Haifa, you are going to hear very loudly from the IDF. And we've already seen the beginning of this response in Dakhya. We've got 50 villages being evacuated in southern Lebanon. The IDF is signaling that it is not prepared to accept the slippery slope of equations. And they're saying, military officials, that Hezbollah just entered a fight that it cannot win. So I think this is a very important moment for the North and the security of the North in terms of the capabilities that you were asking about. Look, Hezbollah used to have the largest non-state arsenal firepower, capability. in the world. Today, it's greatly reduced after Operation Northern Arrows and the entire, war in the north. So we're looking, according to the Alma Center assessments, at something like 20 to 25,000 rockets, and they are, spread out all across Lebanon. So those capabilities are there. But in terms of the ability to launch massive ground invasions, that capability is no longer here. Hezbollah cannot do that because of the IDF's work and presence in southern Lebanon.
All right. I just want to say that we're getting these numbers in right now. The IDF says that it struck about 70 Hezbollah weapons depots and rocket launching sites over the course of the last several hours. These targets, they say, were intended to be used by Hezbollah to advance terror attacks against the IDF. And like we said, the Israeli military has essentially said that this is going to continue to be an offensive. They do not intend on striking Hezbollah infrastructure in the coming days. Now, we're going to turn now to Beersheba. At least 19 people have been wounded in the southern Israeli city following a ballistic missile impact on a residential area earlier this afternoon. This comes after 9 people were killed in an impact yesterday in Beit Shemesh, just near Jerusalem, and another 2 were killed prior in central Israel. As of now, almost 800 people have been hospitalized in Israel since the start of the fighting. We just got word that in the last round of ballistic missile fire from Iran, there actually were not any injuries that took place about a half an hour ago. But the IDF says that it's destroyed around 600 Iranian regime sites in airstrikes amid this ongoing fire from Iran. Joining us now from the site of the ballistic missile attack in Beersheba is our correspondent, Joe Brown. Joe, we were with you earlier. We saw the site of that missile impact. What do we know about the status of the victims at this point?
So none of the victims were severely injured. Most of them either suffered from injuries to do with the fragments of glass that broke from the shockwaves, or they are suffering from anxiety attacks. But either way, they are in Sorok Hospital where they are getting treated. As you saw earlier in the broadcast, there was a huge crater around about 7 feet deep, and this shows the severity of the Iranian ballistic missiles. They weigh around about 500 to 1,000 kilograms, very, very heavy, and the impact that they can cause can be devastating. Luckily, it hit a courtyard, which is where we are stood right now, so there weren't any buildings that were damaged. But it was actually very close to a safe room. If you remember yesterday in Beit Shemesh, the missile hit a safe room, so the people who were there, all 9 of them who were there sheltering, were unfortunately killed because, unfortunately, even though it is as good as you can get under the circumstances, if there is a direct hit on your shelter, then there is a very strong chance that you will die. And this was around about 20 meters away from a safe room. You can see a door that has been destroyed, very badly damaged, but the insides of it managed to stay intact. And that is why it is important to follow the Home Front Command's guidelines. And we even saw today, just around about half an hour ago, with the missile that landed in central Israel in Petach Tikva, it caused a very small amount of damage. Anyone who was in the safe rooms nearby would not have faced it. Magen David Adom said there weren't any casualties, but pictures have been circulating showing the impact from what looks like debris rather than a direct missile hit. So all in all, 19 people were hospitalized today, but nothing serious.
All right. Well, the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu actually visited the site of that direct ballistic missile impact in Beit Shemesh earlier today. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
This is the 3rd day of the Operation Roaring Lion, the operation the Israeli army and the state of Israel set out to, with our great friends, the United States of America and President Trump, to thwart existential threats to Israel and great threats to America and the entire world. When I stand here in a place that was bombarded by the terrorists in Tehran against innocent civilians, you see the difference. The tyrants of Tehran target civilians. We target the tyrants of Tehran to protect civilians. I've said for many years that they threaten not only Israel and not only America. They chant death to Israel, death to America. That's their ultimate target. But I said that they would also target those in between, that they would target Europe. They did. And if this regime, this terrorist regime of the kind we've never seen in the world, if they get nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them, ballistic missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles, they will threaten all of humanity. So we set out to protect ourselves, but in so doing, we protect many others. And I want to say special thanks to our great friend and a great leader of the world, Donald Trump, for joining us in this crucial effort to save the world.
All right. Well, we have new guidelines now from the Homefront Command. It looks like restrictions are going to be staying in place nationwide until at least Saturday night at 8 p.m. That means no gatherings are allowed. School is going to remain closed. Workplaces are closed except for essential sectors. But there is actually a bit of movement on travel. Israel's expected to start gradually reopening its airspace next week. That has just been clarified by the transportation minister. She says that aviation authorities are going to be reopening the country's airspace in a phased manner starting next week. But it's, of course, subject to security developments. As everybody knows, the skies have been shut since Saturday. And basically, Regev has asked the government to inform Israeli airlines to get ready for a partial reopening of the country's airspace as early as Sunday so that they can start operating these repatriation flights to bring back tens of thousands of Israelis who have been stranded abroad. We also heard the Israeli carrier Israel say that it's launching a way to get Israelis who are stranded abroad back home. Starting tomorrow, the airline is planning to operate special flights from 6 different European cities, including Prague and Budapest, not to Israel, but to Taba International Airport in Egypt, which is just across the border from the Israeli southern city of Eilat. And from there, passengers would be able to cross by land back into Israel. Now, let's turn to the region, the wider region. Iran is continuing to strike Gulf Arab states in response to U.S. and Israeli strikes. They say they are targeting American and Israeli assets, but that they've also hit hotels, airports, and residential areas in 8 different countries: the UAE, Qatar, Jordan, Kuwait, Oman, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Bahrain. Qatar has said that they actually just intercepted 2 Iranian fighter jets, and this comes after explosions were reported in Bahrain and Dubai overnight. Smoke was also seen near the U.S. Embassy in Kuwait. An Iraqi Shiite militia claimed it targeted U.S. troops at Baghdad airport with a drone. And we have Alex Schloss with this report.
Before this war even began, Iran warned that any confrontation would not stay contained, that it would become a regional conflict. When the United States and Israel launched strikes, Tehran initially said its retaliation would be limited to Israeli and U.S. military targets. But almost immediately, Iranian ballistic missiles and drones expanded beyond that narrow frame. Israel was hit first. Then, within hours, projectiles launched toward Gulf states, affecting the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, Oman, and Saudi Arabia. Airports, ports, energy facilities, and residential areas were damaged or disrupted. Those governments reacted swiftly, condemning Tehran's strikes as violations of their sovereignty and threats to civilian lives. Countries that had been navigating their own tensions, notably between Saudi Arabia and the UAE before the war, publicly aligned in opposition to Iran's aggression. In Abu Dhabi, a strike hit near a French naval facility, prompting France to dispatch an aircraft carrier to the region. The spillover continued. Iranian missiles and debris landed in Jordan and Iraq, both hosting U.S. forces. In Syria, a fallen missile killed 4 civilians. In Cyprus, a drone struck near a British airbase, drawing European territory into the conflict. In response, Greece, a NATO member, has sent 2 frigates and 2 fighter jets en route to Cyprus to bolster defense cooperation. Inside Israel, major population centers were targeted. And in the West Bank, missile debris landed in several areas, underscoring how Palestinian areas were also exposed to the widening barrage. In total, since the outbreak of war, Iranian strikes have affected 11 countries, plus the Palestinian territories. What Tehran long warned, that any war would become regional, has materialized. And in doing so, Iran's campaign has not only widened the battlefield, but, at least for now, helped forge an unusual and temporary alignment of states rolling back their differences to oppose it.
All right, I'd like to turn now to our senior Middle East correspondent, Ariel Osran, and our diplomatic correspondent, Owen Alterman, who are still with us in the studio. So, I think we've been wanting to talk about this for a while, just the fact that Qatar says that its Air Force shot down 2 Iranian Russian-made bombers. Ariel, what can you tell us about this?
Yeah, so they're saying, the Qatar Defense Ministry saying that it downed 2 Sukhoi 24. These are Russian-made fighter jets, as you described, that they came from Iranian territory. In addition to that, saying that their air defenses intercepted 7 ballistic missiles and 5 drones that targeted various areas in the country. This would be the first we have seen, not only against Israel, but in general, coming from Iran, that they scrambled fighter jets against another country. This would be a significant escalation, and it is interesting that they chose to scramble those jets against Qatar, of all countries, perhaps the country of those 11 countries that have been affected by this, by Iran's attacks, perhaps the closest to it in terms of diplomatic relations. But this is just one example with Qatar. For example, if we look at the UAE, which I think we can say that has been the hardest hit or the most frequently hit country by Iran, even more than Israel in terms of drones, for example. We're talking about nearly 690 drones launched from Iran at the UAE since Saturday alone. Add to that 174 ballistic missiles, killing 3 people. So this is just 2 examples of how Iran is picking up all the stops targeting the Gulf.
All right, we're going out for a quick commercial break, but we're going to continue this discussion when we get back. This is I-24. And we are back on I-24 News. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for sticking with us. Well, Iran is continuing to strike Gulf Arab states in response to U.S. and Israeli strikes. Now, Qatar has just released a statement saying that they downed 2 fighter jets coming from Iran. In addition, they say that they've successfully intercepted at least 7 ballistic missiles through their air defenses, and that they intercepted 5 drones, which were targeting several areas of the country today. Iran, for its part, says that the Islamic Republic is targeting American and Israeli assets in the Gulf, but they have also been hitting hotels, airports, and residential areas in 8 different countries, including the UAE, Qatar, Jordan, Kuwait, Oman, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Bahrain. Now, joining us from Manama, from Bahrain, on Zoom is Ahmed Khuzai. He's a political consultant. Ahmed, Iran says that it is targeting American and Israeli assets, but clearly we have been seeing these strikes hitting hotels, airports, residential areas. Break this down for us. How are Gulf governments interpreting this? How has Bahrain, for one, reacted? Do they see this as direct retaliation or really as just kind of a dangerous widening of the war?
Well, these are very dangerous times. And before I get to that, I saw funny numbers today that indicates that as of today, Iran has attacked more Arab countries than Israel ever did. I mean, that's funny for us here in the Middle East, since everybody is always talking about how Israel is not a friend and otherwise. That being said, how Iran started the whole war on the Gulf, not on just American interests, is basically baffling. It was expected that they have a proportionate retaliation of a single hit on an American base in one of the countries, like it did after the 12-day war. But it has been escalating since day one. It's been 3 days now. I'm talking to you from Bahrain. So since Saturday, we started facing all of these assaults. They claim that they are only targeting American interests, but what's happening in reality is even much more than that. We've seen the airports being hit. We've seen factories in Qatar and UAE. We've seen infrastructure. And today, there have been some basically statements unofficial ones, of course, but it has been spreading around social media by Iranians that even the causeway between Bahrain and Saudi is endangered.
I'm interested to hear how the public views this. Obviously, we are seeing statements from different governments, but, in Bahrain, for one, what is the public saying about these strikes? Who is being blamed? Is it the United States and Israel for essentially starting this conflict by initiating strikes on Saturday? Or is that not essentially how this is being interpreted?
It's a little bit of everything. We have a lot of people are, of course, blaming Iran for what's happening. You have others blaming Israel and the United States for starting it. And as well, we have others who are standing or aligning with the Ayatollah and Iran here in Bahrain. And that, to me, is even more dangerous than any direct assault from Iran.
Now, the other kind of crazy number that we've seen is hundreds of drones being launched, more specifically at the United Arab Emirates, by the Islamic Republic of Iran. Does it appear to you that the Islamic Republic is targeting certain Gulf countries more than others? And what would the reasoning be there?
I've been looking through the numbers. On Saturday, it was most probably Qatar. Then it was Bahrain yesterday. And today it's the Emirates. I think they have a strategy. They're trying to evade from being the direct point of interest in this war, especially with the proxies being more active. We saw Hezbollah attacking Israel earlier. And then even within Iran, everybody started to forget about the protesters in Iran. So how can they do all of that? They are just shifting the main location of Ground Zero from Iran to the Gulf states. I'm not sure if it's working or not, but as we can see, everybody's talking about what's happening in the Gulf more than everybody's talking about what's happening in Iran. It is a dangerous game. It is aggressive. And we started seeing, as you just mentioned, with the news coming from Qatar of downing 2 fighter jets by Iran, that the Gulf may start fighting back.
Right. We've seen how many Gulf states have tried to kind of carefully balance relations with both Washington and Tehran in recent years. Obviously, Iran is a big economic partner to certain Gulf Arab nations. Does this wave of strikes force them to pick a side more openly now? And what do you think that side is going to be when it comes to days ahead?
Just like you mentioned, before the 12-day war, before this war as well, we all saw how the Gulf states, including Saudi Arabia, sometimes Qatar, and of course all the time with Oman, trying to basically take America into delaying the war or get engaged into negotiations. Both negotiations failed, but the Gulf was always there to make things at least easier or calmer. Whenever these negotiations fail, at least Oman is on the good side of Iran. But as of yesterday, they hit them twice, and Oman are not happy about it. We saw what happened in Riyadh. Of course, Saudi is not happy about it, which means that nobody can be a friend of Iran today because even their friends are being affected by Iran, not by anybody else. And how will that be affected? As you just mentioned right now, this is bringing the Gulf countries closer to each other. And I think this time they'll be closer than they haven't been over the past 20 years at least.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank you, Ahmed, so much for joining us. Really interesting to hear your take on this, and stay safe in Bahrain.
Thank you.
We're just getting this report right now. UAE air defenses have intercepted 9 ballistic missiles, 6 cruise missiles, and 148 drones today. That's according to the Emirati Defense Ministry. The ministry also says that Iran has fired 174 ballistic missiles at the UAE since Saturday, 161 of which were intercepted. I'm going to turn back to our correspondents in the studio, our Middle East correspondent, Ariel Osran, and of course, our diplomatic correspondent, Owen Alterman. Owen, I want to talk to you just a little bit more about what this means for relations, more specifically between Israel and Gulf Arab nations, because we heard Ahmed, the guest that was just on from Bahrain, essentially said that he thinks that these attacks by the Islamic Republic of Iran are bringing together the Gulf Arab nations. But could this, in fact, bring the Gulf Arab nations more together with Israel?
I would hope so, Natasha, but I'm not all that optimistic. Look, obviously in the short term, they're being attacked by Iran, and not just in a playful way, the way we saw in June, but in a real way. The idea that Qatar shot 2 Iranian planes out of the sky with pilots in them is absolutely staggering. And to see the Qataris even before that go on to a joint statement, sign into a joint statement with the UAE and the rest of the Gulf states and the United States against Iran and put its name along with them, not trying to play both sides against each other or the traditional Qatari way of being independent and trying to stay away from the fray, was absolutely staggering. That said, this war is going to end. It will end in one way or another with the Iranian regime being much weaker in all likelihood. But at the same time, the issues that were difficult and that pushed some of these countries away from Israel are still there. Obviously, the situation in the Gaza Strip. And as I continue to say, especially in the case of Saudi Arabia, the fact that Israel is of less utility to the Saudis, as I see it, as I've heard between the lines from Saudis, than it was 2 years ago. If 2 years ago, Mohammed bin Salman needed to reach out to Israel to prove his liberal bona fides, I think 2 more years into his program, he's proved those and doesn't need it so much. Saudi Arabia is much stronger in Washington than it was, doesn't much need Israel, and Israel's position in Washington is weaker. Right. Its connection with Donald Trump is stronger, economy may be even stronger. So they just don't need Israel as much, and that isn't changed by the war.
All right. You know, we have some updates on Hezbollah right now. Lebanese media has reported at least 5 Israeli airstrikes in Beirut's southern suburbs, which is a well-known Hezbollah stronghold. And the IDF has stated just a short while ago that an additional Hezbollah senior terrorist was struck in Beirut. We're also seeing a new wave of airstrikes currently hitting Tehran. I just want to quickly turn back to our correspondent, Ariel Osran. I understand that an Islamic Jihad commander was hit in these strikes. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so we're talking about multiple waves of airstrikes throughout the day. Fresh one, 5 strikes in the Dakhia of Beirut, that is the Hezbollah stronghold, with the IDF confirming that it targeted an additional senior terrorist. It didn't affiliate which group this target was from. And this shows that there is a wide range of terror targets in Lebanon, not solely exclusive to Hezbollah. Leading example for this is the Palestinian Islamic Jihad's military commander in Lebanon. We're talking about Adam Adnan El-Othman, nicknamed Abu Hamza, who the PIJ confirms was eliminated in an Israeli airstrike today on Beirut's southern suburb. And so when the IDF says that it is going after another senior terrorist without specifying that it is Hezbollah, when earlier in the day, when it went after a senior Hezbollah official, it did specify Hezbollah. This shows that, first of all, the range of threats is much broader than just Hezbollah. Also, there's Palestinian elements that are operating in Lebanon, and that the IDF isn't shying away from going after them as well, not only Hezbollah.
All right, well, we're going to turn to Europe now. Rumors have been swirling that Germany was seriously considering joining the U.S.-Israeli campaign if the Islamic Republic of Iran keeps attacking across the region. But now the German foreign minister apparently says that the German government does not intend to participate offensively in the U.S.-Israeli campaign against Iran. He says action is only going to be taken if German soldiers are attacked. This comes after 2 unmanned aerial vehicles headed towards the United Kingdom's Royal Air Force Akrotiri base in Cyprus. They were intercepted earlier today after a drone hit that same British base overnight on Sunday. The British Prime Minister says the UK has now agreed to a U.S. request to use British military bases for defensive strikes, but it seems that no European nation is ready to get involved. And joining us now from Tel Aviv is Melody Sucharowicz. She's an expert on German-Israeli relations. I hope I got your last name correct there. And she's also a former foreign affairs advisor and international spokesperson for Defense Minister Benny Gantz. Now, Melody, there were real rumors that Germany might be joining the U.S.-Israeli campaign if Iran kept on escalating. How do you perceive Germany's decision to only get involved in defensive measures?
Well, as clear and intense the rumors, as little there is to them at this stage, I would say. Also, after speaking to several of the foreign policy makers themselves, who really stand behind the chancellor's statement of several days ago that now is the time not to lecture Israel and the allies, but to stand united with them and support their quest. But beyond that, beyond this clear strategic position, there is very little intention and especially very little appetite to actually get involved militarily. The capacities to symbolically support, for example, through aerial fueling, through the mission in Jordan would be there. The political capacity to pull such a step through, especially with the SPD, the Social Democrat coalition partner, is close to zero.
Interesting. You know, obviously, the decision to target a British airbase in Cyprus is a very strong one to be made, that the Islamic Republic, has made. Obviously, we've been seeing that the Islamic Republic has been targeting Gulf nations. But how coordinated do you think Europe is at the moment in responding to any other measures like this?
Well, just have a look at the statements coming out of the EU from the last couple of days, and you have a clear answer. Europe, there is a part of Europe, let's call it the more realistic, pragmatic part, including, of course, the E3, that came out with this clear statement this morning saying that if our interests are, including the Chancellor, Germany, France, and England, if our interests are threatened, we will help deal with the threat at its source, the threat emerging from the Iranian regime. At the same time, you have other European countries like Spain that are sticking to the rather, let's say, suicidal position of the pro-Palestinian and even pro-Ayatollah camp that prefers sticking to that radical leftist anti-Israel and anti-Western bottom line and also anti-US ideology rather than caring for their own interests and understanding that Iranian ballistic missiles already now can reach the south of Europe. So if you ask about coordination, I believe there is a split, and we can only hope, looking at Europe's self-owned strategic interests, that the pragmatic camp will prevail.
What kind of message do you think that the Islamic Republic is going to take if we do not see any type of European coordinated response to the aggression from Iranian forces, not only in Cyprus, but also against allies?
Well, you know, we have to face the facts. Europe lost relevance in the Middle East and also vis-a-vis Iran. And Iran has learned a horrifically bad lesson, a fatal lesson, I would say, when the EU, following the Trump exit from the JCPOA in 2018, had an instinct of siding with the Ayatollahs and trying to invent financial mechanisms that could help the Iranians circumvent the newly installed US sanctions. So, and that, of course, by the Iranian regime was seen as a sign of weakness and increasing their appetite for nuclear bribery, which they continue to do. So now, again, anything other than a clear stance of strategic clarity and strength on behalf of Europe in the face of the biggest terrorism, nuclear threats and human rights threat there is to the world today, anything other than that would again be seen as weak and would again empower exactly those who need to be defeated now.
All right, Melody, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us. U.S. President Donald Trump is about to speak to press shortly, and joining us now is our U.S. senior correspondent, Mike Wagenheim. Mike, do we have any information about what Trump is going to be addressing in this speech?
I understand he's just taken to the podium, so let's keep an eye on that. But this is a pre-planned event to honor soldiers who showed bravery, the annual Medal of Honor event. So this is not tied directly to what's going on in Iran, but the White House press office did inform media that Trump is expected to make remarks on Iran, possibly might take questions from the press. This is not a speech about Iran, but he will potentially comment on the situation. He's spoken to several media outlets earlier on today already, including to CNN, in which he dispelled the notion that he's ruling out so-called boots on the ground. He said he's not ruling that possibility out, that there may, in fact, be eventual U.S. soldiers on the ground, although he obviously is not going to tip the enemy off to any potential plans for that. He said the big wave, so-called big wave, has yet to actually happen. He said that's actually in the works. So whatever Iran has seen so far, it's not going to be the worst of it for them, that there's more, in fact, planning being done at this point in time. He said it looks as if this will be a 4-week operation. Keep in mind, we're only a couple of days into it. Of course, that's just a projection, no telling where this situation will take us one way or another. Again, he said he's open to potentially speaking with the Iranians. The Iranians have made it quite clear today they're in no mood to speak with the U.S., and so that kind of cuts off any direct route to diplomacy here. Meanwhile, he said expect heavier casualties. Already 4 American service members have died. The number of injured has skyrocketed today, already up to now 15 at the last tally that the Pentagon has provided. But Trump said that's not, unfortunately, going to be the end of the American casualties that are expected in this war against Iran.
That, of course, brings me to my next question. You know, I'm under the impression that there have now been polls taken about how the American public views the decision to strike Iran on the part of the United States and Israel. What kind of responses are we hearing now from the general American public?
Well, we need to kind of wait, because these polls, especially in the early going, can have great disparity to them. One that was put out yesterday showed about only a quarter of Americans supporting the strike. The one
Mike,
today showing a majority of Americans
right
support
now.
the strike. But
today, the United States military continues to carry out large-scale combat operations in Iran to eliminate the grave threats posed to America by this terrible terrorist regime. Following our obliteration of Iran's nuclear program in Operation Midnight Hammer a short while ago, we warned Iran not to make any attempt to rebuild at a different location because they were unable to use the ones that we so powerfully blew up. But they ignored those warnings and refused to cease their pursuit of nuclear weapons. In addition, the regime's conventional ballistic missile program was growing rapidly and dramatically, and this posed a very clear, colossal threat to America and our forces stationed overseas. The regime already had missiles capable of hitting Europe and our bases, both local and overseas, and would soon have had missiles capable of reaching our beautiful America. The purpose of this fast-growing missile program was to shield their nuclear weapon development and make it extraordinarily difficult for anyone to stop them from making these highly forbidden by us nuclear weapons. We were the ones that were complaining. We were the ones that wanted it stopped, but everybody was behind us. They just didn't have the courage to say so. An Iranian regime armed with long-range missiles and nuclear weapons would be an intolerable threat to the Middle East, but also to the American people. Our country itself would be under threat, and it was very nearly under threat. I was very proud to have knocked out the Iran nuclear deal by President Barack Hussein Obama. That was a horrible, horrible, dangerous document. They would have had nuclear weapons 3 years ago, and they would have used them. But I'll not let that happen. For almost 47 years, this regime has been attacking the United States and killing Americans. Every time you see someone with missing arms and legs or a face that's been absolutely shattered violently, it was almost certainly caused by an Iran roadside bomb. They were put there by General Soleimani, who was the father of the roadside bomb. Very proudly, he thought, but I terminated him in my first term. This was our last best chance to strike what we're doing right now and eliminate the intolerable threats posed by this sick and sinister regime. And they are indeed sick and sinister. Our objectives are clear. First, we're destroying Iran's missile capabilities, and you see that happening on an hourly basis, and their capacity to produce brand new ones, and pretty good ones they make. Second, we're annihilating their Navy. We've knocked out already 10 ships. They're at the bottom of the sea. Third, we're ensuring that the world's number one sponsor of terror can never obtain a nuclear weapon, never going to have a nuclear weapon. I said that from the beginning. They're never going to have a nuclear weapon. They were on the road to getting one legitimately through a deal that was signed foolishly by our country. And finally, we're ensuring that the Iranian regime cannot continue to arm, fund, and direct terrorist armies outside of their borders. And we thought we had a deal, but then they backed out. And they came back, and we thought we had a deal, and they backed out. I said, you can't deal with these people. You got to do it the right way. Today, we grieve for the 4 heroic American service members who have been killed in action and send our love and support to their families. In their memory, we continue this mission with ferocious, unyielding resolve to crush the threat this terrorist regime poses to the American people, and a threat indeed it is. We have the strongest and most powerful, by far, military in the world, and we will easily prevail. We're already substantially ahead of our time projections, but whatever the time is, it's okay. Whatever it takes, we will always, and we have right from the beginning, we projected 4 to 5 weeks, but we have capability to go far longer than that. We'll do it. Whatever somebody said today, they said, oh, well, if the president wants to do it really quickly. After that, he'll get bored. I don't get bored. There's nothing boring about this. Do you agree with that, Pete? I don't think there's anything, Mr. General. I think there's nothing boring about it. Somebody actually said from the media, I think he'll get bored after about a week or two. No, we don't get bored. I never get bored. If I got bored, I wouldn't be standing here right now. I guarantee you that, to go through what I had to go through. We also projected 4 weeks to terminate the military leadership. And as you know, that was done in about an hour. So we're ahead of schedule there by a lot. But please join me in thanking every American service member who bravely is standing in harm's way. They really are incredible. And I just want to thank you. We have a lot of them right here. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. That was U.S. President Donald Trump talking about the war with Iran. Just before we let you go, we have an updated broadcasting schedule to keep you updated on all of the latest regarding the war. This is going to be in place for the following week, and that means that we're going to be starting our broadcasts here on I-24 News at 4 p.m. Israel time. Then we will continue our coverage at 6, 8 o'clock, and then we're going to also have a 2-hour special until from 10 to 12 a.m.